Hey there everyone. Now that the dust has settled on the 2021 State of Origin series, we're going to have a little bit of a recap on each of the 3 games and also a little bit of a peer and look into next year's series and into the future of both teams and State of Origin, and just see what might transpire next year and over the next few years. But guys, it was historical in a few different areas this series, and really quite unusual also in a few areas, you know, being a rugby league historian and having gone to these games in person since 1986 and been watching before then, even as a young fella. The series was just unbelievable, really, and you know, I have to first and foremost give congratulations to the New South Wales Blues. They just played tremendous, and it will go down as one of the most dominant series wins in history. Even though it was a 2-1 result and it wasn't a sweep, a 3-0 blue wash, it will go down as one of the most, just absolutely all-conquering teams of all time, led by who's actually becoming known as one of the great State of Origin coaches, Brad Fittler. You know, notice I said State of Origin coaches. Obviously, he hasn't, you know, had the experience in the NRL except for a brief stint with the Roosters a long time ago, back in 2007, 2008. But he's really. It's interesting because New South Wales have followed the coaching kind of model of Queensland when they were so successful from 2006 to when Mal Meninga finished up in 2015. They got an ex-player who's just an absolute idol. Those players adored Mal Meninga, those Queensland players, and they would just do anything that he said. They'd run through a brick wall for him. And then they surrounded him with a few strategic, first and X's and O's types of coaches who were on the cutting edge of what was happening in the sport and at NRL, like Michael Hagan and Neil Henry. And it was so successful, and the Blues have done the same. They've got a legend from the past who's just idolised by those Blues players in Brad Fittler, and they've surrounded him with real strategic tacticians, and it's just working amazingly. So it was one of the great historical series wins for New South Wales. I think we'll look back in 10, 20 years and say that this was one of their best teams of all time, for sure. And the results prove that. So game 1 obviously played in unusual circumstances, the series, with everything that's going on with the coronavirus pandemic, which hopefully is going to be over, or we can move forward from it very, very soon, and as soon as possible. But game 1 was shifted to Townsville. And it was because of obviously the coronavirus issues, where the game was initially supposed to be held in Melbourne, but a crowd of 27,000 people turned out at Queensland Country Bank Stadium in Townsville, and really from the start you could see Queensland were off the pace from the very beginning. New South Wales really dominated. The one area, if I could pinpoint one, it was their ruck speed and also their line speed. They were just quicker. Notice the word speed was in both of those factors. They just looked so much faster. And it was to play the balls. They were dominating when they had the ball. Each tackle they were on their knees and elbows and able to get up for quick play the balls. Damien Cook was just terrorising them at a dummy half, terrorising Queensland. And Queensland just looked so much slower. They were dominated in tackles, often rolled onto their back for dominant tackles for New South Wales. And hence, that really allows the line speed to be what it'll be from particular teams. So New South Wales line speed was so much quicker. They were able to get up and really fluster Queensland's attack and really stifle them. They just had no room to move, Queensland. And Queensland's kicking game was just horrendous in that first match. So New South Wales jumped out to an early lead. Queensland, through Kurt Capewell, did score just before halftime, and you felt like, they might have a bit of a sniff here. But that was quickly extinguished with Latrell Mitchell's first try in the second half in the 48th minute. And triple to Tom Trbojevic, who went on to be man of the series, and certainly I would agree with that. It would be him or Tedesco I would have given man of the series to. But yeah, and then Brian To'o with a double, the Penrith winger, out on the left wing, just had a field day. Didn't have to do much for many of his tries. Latrell Mitchell on that left-hand side scored a double as well, and it was a good return for Latrell back to the State of Origin arena, and then Daniel Safidi. The kicking was perfect from New South Wales. Nathan Cleary had a wow of a game, 7 of 7 with the boot. Latrell got 1 of 1, and it was just a domination. And it's funny because like you look at the stats and the possession was only 51% New South Wales, 49% Queensland. You think, oh, it's pretty even Stevens, could go either way. But no, and the completion rate, believe it or not, was absolutely even, 78%, incredible. It was just the missed tackles from Queensland, and like I said, those factors of how the pace of the game. New South Wales played at their pace, they wanted a quicker tempo, they had a lighter back row, and it really showed. People like David Fifita just had nowhere to move for Queensland, whereas New South Wales, Cameron Murray just did an absolute number on David Fifita. He was, wherever Fifita was, Cameron Murray was. Unbelievable work rate from Murray, the South Sydney back rower, and penalties were 4-all as well, and Queensland only had 3 more errors. But you're going to see the stats as we move to Game 2 now, which was then played at Lang Park in Brisbane. I know some people call it Suncorp Stadium, but I've been going to that stadium since I was a little kid and always call it by its traditional name, not its sponsored name. So Lang Park, Game 2, and you thought the Queenslanders were going to lift. You know, in the cauldron, they're home, and it just didn't happen. Their attack was just nullified. They tried harder. They were slightly improved overall, but just New South Wales were too good. They're just by far the better team in 2021. So the end score 26-0 was pretty indicative of the match. The first 5 minutes, Queensland's intensity was just right on. But it was only 5 minutes, right? So you notice that the Queensland forwards fatigued very quickly in Game 2. And then New South Wales, they just really wore Queensland down, to be honest with you. Again, you could just see that the Blues forward pack was just a lot fitter, a lot more mobile, a smaller pack, and maybe that's the way of the future. You know, smaller back rowers, a couple of real big boppers as front rowers who just get you over the advantage line, which the Blues have got, and speedy hooker. Andrew McCulloch tried hard. He was brought into the team as the new hooker with Harry Grant out injured from Game 1. But McCulloch, he's a really solid player. I really, really respect him, just like anyone does. I mean, I respect any player that gets out at that level and plays the tough game of rugby league. But he just doesn't have the athleticism and the punch in attack, to be honest, and the creativity, McCulloch. Just the attack was just non-existent for Queensland. And when they did get opportunities, they could not convert them. Again, the speed, and I think it was after Game 2, Paul Vaughton, the Queensland legendary lock and second rower from the 80s, he said that he just in his usual very blunt way, he just said, we've got no speed. We've got no speed. We're just too slow. And he was right. I mean, it's a very simplistic way to look at it, but it is true. And Game 2, Josh Addo-Carr, he was just having a field day out in that right wing. Latrell Mitchell was pretty spectacular. He was dominant. Tom Trbojevic again scored a try. Nathan Cleary was sensational. I believe that he injured his collarbone early in Game 2, and I believe there was a fracture even they discovered afterwards, which put him out of Game 3. But that was a true heroic effort, and in this modern day and age where everything's so sanitized, even in sports. Everyone saw workplace health and safety, which is important, but sometimes it's just so overdone and pedantic. We've got to live. You got to live your life, or else you're not living, right? You're not alive. And in sport, it's become like that too. And obviously the head knocks are a big issue. But it was awesome to see a heroic effort where a guy had the green light to go ahead. If he wanted to, it's his body. Yes, he had an injured shoulder, but he wanted to be out there for his team. He wanted to put his stamp on State of Origin history and on folklore. in the great arena of Origin, and he did that. And you know, yeah, he paid the price with the injury, but you know what? That moment will be there for him for the rest of his life. I can definitely connect with that, and you know, he wanted that, and good on him for doing that. Well done, Nathan Cleary. A true historic, courageous Origin moment in Game 2. So, man of the match was James Tedesco in Game 2. I should say man of the match in Game 1 was actually is Turbo, of course. And heading into Game 3, a lot of people didn't give Queensland much of a hope, to be honest, as the helicopter flies past. And yeah, but that Queensland pride came through, and some people were saying, oh, why do they play a dead rubber? You know, New South Wales have already got the series. There is never a dead rubber in State of Origin. If you know the history of it, if you understand it, if you understand why it was created in the first place, right, then you understand that there is never a dead rubber. And to be honest, for me, someone who loves sport and competing, there's never a dead match in anything, no matter what level it is, if it's professional or D grade, whatever, social in whatever sport. You know, that's a moment in your life that you can go out and embrace life and do your best and compete. And, you know, Game 3 proved that. It was an absolute cracker of a game. It was a beauty. So let's have a look now at the completion rates, because I always thought this was interesting. Back in Game 2, Queensland had a better completion rate, 80 to 77% to the Blues, yet they got flogged 26-0. In Game 3, they only had a slightly better completion rate, 88%. That was really impressive, actually. So their handling was awesome in Game 3. Obviously a bit more confident after being together as a team. But they made some subtle changes, Queensland, in their lineup. They brought in the hammer, Amiso Tabuai-Fidow, at left centre, and he was really good defensively. He was good. He scored the first try of the game. And Ben Hunt went to hooker. That was probably the most significant personnel change for Game 3 for Queensland. And also Valentine Holmes being able to be shifted back to the wing, and Kalen Ponga going to fullback. Kalen Ponga is an absolute superstar, prodigy. And he didn't play in the State of Origin series last year. He was unavailable. But boy, oh boy, did it make a difference. It makes you wonder whether, you know, if Queensland had him from the start of the series, I don't think they would have won the series. I think New South Wales still would have won the series. They were that much of a better team. And also, New South Wales in Game 3 were missing their halves combination. And anyone who knows rugby league knows that if your halves have no continuity, particularly at that level in Origin, you might be able to get away with it at club level and even NRL level. But if you're shifting your halves around, particularly from a successful team, it's going to be a difficult adjustment, no matter what talented players you've got around you. So that was a factor also in Game 3. But I think definitely Queensland's attack would have been better. I think Queensland would have scored at least 2 to 4 tries in each of those games, Games 1 and 2. But I don't think they would have won either game, even if Ponga was there. But yeah, Ben Hunt got a double, unbelievable, and man of the match. He was sensational, and he tackled his absolute you-know-what out, and he never stopped trying. For the Blues, Latrell Mitchell actually scored a really, it was just a crushing first try. He scored the first try in the 11th minute, because Queensland pretty much had dominated, or if not dominating, were well and truly on top in the first 10 minutes of the game. And then when Latrell went over, you just thought, oh, here we go. And but Queensland held strong. They stuck to their game plan. It was obviously to be a little bit more expansive. They were emphasising trying to, speed up the ruck a little bit with quicker play. The balls, it worked. Paul Green made the necessary adjustments. Good on you, Paul. Well done. Because the first 2 games were a really, really tragic initiation to State of Origin coaching. I really felt for him. Myself, having coached rep teams before, and obviously not at that level, but at junior representative level, and it's not always the easiest gig. You've only got a group of players for a small amount of time to prepare for matches or carnivals, and Paul Green made the adjustments by Game 3. Obviously it was too late for the series, but Queensland were victorious 20-18 in Game 3, and I think it was a really important win going into next year's series. So player of the series was the Turbo, Tom Trbojevic, very much deserved. And Valentine Holmes looked a lot more comfortable back on the wing. Unfortunately, he did injure his shoulder just before half time, which was a cruel blow. But the hammer went out on the wing there, and it was Queensland made those adjustments with Capewell playing a bit in the centres as well and having to cover there. And they did a really, really tremendous job actually covering for that loss. I thought that was going to be a big thing going into halftime too, something that could shift the momentum, certainly back to the Blues, but it didn't. And to Queensland's credit, they held tough and eked out a 20-18 victory. All right, so what can we take from this year's series? Looking into our crystal ball, heading into 2022. So, I think the template was set for Queensland in Game 3. They need to, for Queensland to be successful, in this modern era of rugby league, you have to, no matter what team you are, what level, you have to be able to score points. You have to have attack. You can't, like back in the olden days with Canterbury Bankstowns of the world and, hard-nosed teams like, I'm thinking, like even Manly in the 90s, they had some good attacking players, but they were a very strong defensive team. Then again, the Bulldogs in the 90s as well. These low-scoring games, even the power teams of the Broncos, they had great attacking backlines, but their success really came from just their bang, 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 4 hit-ups, and then Alfie and Kevy playing off the back of that and just terrorising worn-out packs from just the onslaught, the relentless onslaught of the Webb Keystons, Sivanasivas, Gordon Tallises of the world. So, in this modern day and age, you need attack, and I think Queensland have realised that. They made selection changes Game 3 that reflected that. So I think they need to go in with that mindset into the series. And I think another thing too is of having huge back rowers. Yes, it's good to have one strong. I think probably just one good, real. If you're going to carry like a 110 plus kilo forward like a Fafita, or back in the day like a Sonny Bill Williams or a Willie Mason, I think you can't afford to have too many of those guys. I don't think you can afford to have your lock Tino, and then have David Fafita as well. I think it was good that they shifted Tino into the front row for Game 3. I think you saw that more mobile pack. I have a huge amount of respect for David Fafita's immense talent. I think he's Gordon Tallis 2.0. He can be. He has that potential to be the most destructive forward in the game, and he is at times at Clubland. But I'd really like to see Queensland be able to utilise him better. And he's got to realise that when things aren't going great, like he's not making breaks, he can still contribute. He's still got to get down in the trenches and do the dirty work. So he's got to improve his work rate like that. But he's an incredible talent, probably the most talented forward in the game, to be honest. Talented, right? I noticed I said, certainly not the best. He's up there and he has potential to be for sure. So I think, a lighter, more mobile, more importantly, mobile, back row that has a work rate, that can match New South Wales's, and because we were just getting turned around defensively because we had big guys in games 1 and 2, and just couldn't recover. To be honest with you, just couldn't keep up with the tempo that New South Wales were playing. So I think that's going to be the key for Queensland. From New South Wales, I think it's just more of the same. I think they've established a core. They've found a halves pairing for the first time in a long time. And that's always been one of New South Wales' biggest issues. They had Ricky Stewart and Laurie Daly for a consistent period from 1990 through to 1994 Super League era, and New South Wales really dominated that era from 90 to 94, only dropping one series. And same with Queensland. When they would have Thurston and Lockyer as the halves pairing, and then moving on, once Lockyer retired, to Cronk and Thurston, you can see that's so important to have that continuity with your halves. And obviously that combination then with your dummy half, Cameron Smith being there the whole time. And for New South Wales in the 90s, it was obviously Benny Elias as the dummy half throughout that whole period. So you can see that continuity is just so crucial in that ruck ball playing area. So I think for New South Wales, it's more of the same. I think, they follow the template that Queensland had for so many years, where you stick solid with your players. You only make changes really through injury, or if there's huge, mammoth form slumps and obviously in attitude issues or whatnot, discipline issues in terms of the way they're approaching the game or whatever. But they have to be significant, to be honest. I think they follow the loyalty Queensland card. Whereas Queensland, it'd be awesome if we could unearth a couple of halves. We've got really good halves in, obviously Cameron Munster's a superstar and he'll be there for a long time. But, rugby league's such a brutal sport. You need backup and reinforcements. You need depth. You never know when an injury is going to happen and when a player's career is going to be cut short. That's where I see we, through our development systems with the QRL and Country Rugby League, Queensland Country Rugby League, and through obviously our tier system, our state league, I think it's important that the development of halves and legitimate halves, not just athletes who you program to be a half. We need someone, because Cherry Evans is towards the end, and he's getting on. I know players play a bit longer in this modern day and age, but we've got to start developing some halves. And obviously Ben Hunt was awesome at hooker, but he doesn't even play that position week in, week out. But he's a great hooker. I've always said hooker's his best position. So he'll probably be there for next year, and that's good. But he's also getting on as well in age. So I think that's got to be our priority. I think we've got some decent forwards there. It'd be awesome if we could unearth a couple of really mobile back rowers, like I was saying before. And probably, I think Tino's there as a prop for sure, not as a lock anymore. And Papali is, he's really developed as a leader for this Queensland team over the last 2-3 years. But again, he's also getting on. So those are the areas I think for Queensland. We've unearthed, obviously we've got a great fullback for the future with Ponga. Hopefully he stays in rugby league and doesn't go to rugby union or any other sport. And obviously we've unearthed the hammer. We got some speed now Finally. Dane Gagai always tries his guts out. You know what you're going to get with Dane. So next year I think it'll be a more competitive series. I think New South Wales have every right to start as massive favourites, but I definitely think it'll be more competitive than this year. But we'll just wait and see. Every Origin's an entity to itself, so we'll wait and see. 2022, can't wait for it already. We've got the NRL semi-finals coming up, the final series, and that's going to be awesome. So stay tuned, guys. Danmarsky will be previewing and reviewing a lot more rugby league along the road. And towards the end of this year, guys, I'm going to be, as I've mentioned to a few of you out there in YouTube land, I will be beginning a strictly rugby league only YouTube channel with all my documentaries. I'll shift over there, and I've got such a library of old full matches, so can't wait to do that. So please, I'll let you know when that's coming up, so please join me on that venture, but it'll be more towards the end of the year, obviously, when I have a little bit more time on my hands once I go on holidays from work, and yeah, that'll be definitely something to look forward to. Alright guys, you take care of yourselves out there, ladies and gentlemen. And this is Danmarsky. Enjoy rugby league and enjoy all the NRL has to offer and all the local leagues, the local state leagues, until the grand final at the beginning of October. It's going to be awesome. Take care. Much love to you all. Peace, guys. And you guys have a great one.